Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 48.
What did you say before? We're getting so good at it. I stuffed up.
No, you didn't. You're fine.
Yep.
Welcome to episode 48
Yeah,
of Down
absolutely.
at South Anomalies for the incredible Untold Radio Network.
Yep.
We are broadcasting as usual. We are recording on stolen land, ladies and gentlemen. We all need to say yes in this country. And we need to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and show our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, we have an incredible guest tonight.
We do.
Back for the second time, but it's really important. And I feel...
Is it second or third?
No, it's the second time.
Really?
Yes. Roger Stankovic. And Roger is the Australian Director and
New Zealand Director of MUFON.
That's right. We've called it the MUFON update, but really it's us quizzing.
We're having a chat about.
He can put his MUFON hat on. He can take his MUFON hat off.
Well, I'm going to bring him in now and there he is.
Now, Roger originally started investigating decades ago. He has over 200 cases up his sleeve that he's investigated personally. He's an incredible field researcher. He's written some extraordinary papers on some remarkable cases. He first started, I think he was involved with APRO right at the beginning, but it was 2015. He came on board as the director for...
That's dating. I said that's
dating me.
Dating.
Well, we should be dating ourselves. I turned 65 the other day, so I'm definitely dated.
You're totally dated. You're out of date.
I wake up every day.
You're out of date.
And I don't care what I'm feeling like. I go, I'm still breathing. It's remarkable.
It's great.
It is remarkable. But you interrupted me. So in 2015, he became the Australian Director for Australia and New Zealand, of MUFON.
Yep.
And he's a neuroscientist by trade. Just maybe tell us initially a little bit about
what that means.
Yeah, what it means.
Yeah, thanks, Jay and Aspa. So basically, I did a Bachelor of Science degree initially when I started university studies at the University of Sydney, and then I got a job immediately after I graduated. But then I went back to work at the University of Sydney, and that gave me an opportunity to do a PhD in neuroscience. So I got employed in the neuropathology department in Blackburn Building at Sydney University, and that enabled me to then utilize the resources that were there at the time, because we had human tissue, brain tissue, and spinal cord tissue, and also it enabled us, because we're based at the university, we had the facilities for research as well, because we had an animal house where we could actually import mice and work on mouse models for modeling various human diseases. And what I did, I imported some mice from the from the United States of America, Jackson Laboratories, and I tried to model a disease called motor neuron disease in mice. And so what I did, we got a couple of genes knocked out in this mouse model, and then we exposed them to mercury vapor with the hypothesis that dental amalgam, which was made of various metals, but mainly mercury was a component. And every time you chew, there's a bit of mercury vapor that's released that you inhale, and that mercury vapor ends up in your motor neurons and your spinal cord, and that could cause the disease. So that's what I and I did find some interesting aspects to the research in terms of effects to the nervous system, but it didn't actually explain why people actually, they still don't really know why people, 90% of people get motor neuron disease hasn't got a genetic component to it.
Right. Okay.
So do you think
it's some outside, factor.
Yeah, there's 90%
it's an environmental thing.
Environmental,
Do you think?
yep,
Right.
yep. 90%.
Okay.
My uncle actually died in the middle of my PhD of motor neuron disease. It's really weird. There was my mother's brother, and he was a market gardener. So he worked at my parents had a farm in Sydney southwest, and he was sort of like not quite a neighbouring property, but we dealt with pesticides, and we were market gardeners, so we used all these chemicals, and we're not sure. He might have had some predisposition genetically to the disease, and dealing with the chemicals might have just triggered off the disease in him. But it was just such a coincidence that he ended up with motor neuron disease while I was in the middle of doing my thesis on the actual disease. Really weird.
Is there a certain age that disease consistently presents?
Yeah, it's not common in people that are younger. It usually hits you when you're in your 50s, 60s, or 70s.
Right.
So it's an aging sort of disease, a bit like dementia, where it'll kick in. Although you do get, there's recorded instances of people in their 30s and 20s actually getting motor neuron disease. And
how does it affect people? Sorry.
So it actually it knocks off your motor neurons. So your motor neurons are actually the neurons that the nerve cells that actually connect to your skeletal muscle. So when you're moving, that's all motor neuron function. So if those nerve cells that connect to your muscle that make you to help you move are dying off, and you're only born with a certain number, then that affects movement in your body, including your diaphragm, and that's where it can kill you. Because,
no more breathing.
No more breathing when you're sleeping, because there's two components. There's an autonomic component and a motor component to the diaphragm. So when we sleep, we're not conscious of
the automatic kicks
breathing.
in. Yeah.
So the automatic nervous system kicks in. If that's affected, well, then it's the phrenic nerve that's actually affected that innervates the diaphragm. So basically, when that kicks in, you can easily die if you're not assisted with your respiration.
Is it as slow? Is it similar to Alzheimer's and dementia? And does it take a long time to present itself?
So my uncle, I think, survived for nearly 5 years since onset. So once you like, I think he said he held a hammer and tried to hammer a nail, and he felt like his hands were quite weak, and he couldn't hold the hammer strong enough. But since that first, and he didn't go and see a doctor initially, but later on he thought there's something wrong, because the symptoms got quite a bit worse, and then I think it's usually about 3 to 5 years from very first signs of symptoms to death, whereas some dementias can go on for years and years. Yes.
It's like God.
And did you find at the end of your studies there that the amalgam fillings, do you think they're partially responsible? They're a trigger point as well?
They could be. It just depends.
Good for you.
Having
mercury in your mouth is not good for you. Okay.
No, but the dentists don't include it these days. And my supervisor, who came up with that idea, and I did the experiments, he was poo-pooed about it by the neurologists. They didn't believe it had anything to do with motor neuron disease, but I believe it. I know my research showed that there are effects on the axons of these motor neurons that are affected, because we looked at neurofilaments and microtubules, and we saw a decrease in density of them in the nerve axons. So basically, it might affect someone that's already got a genetic predisposition. Like there might be some polymorphism or some sort of genetic defect where that person, if exposed to a heavy metal, might develop motor neuron disease.
Right. Okay.
That's fascinating. And One day I hope that paper is seen for the powerful document that it is in that research,
Yeah.
because, it's amazing how ubiquitous those fillings were, especially, I'm
Yeah.
65. That
Yeah.
baby boom generation, we
Oh,
had
yeah.
tens of fillings
We're
that
all-
were
Yeah, same
mercury.
here.
Yeah.
Yep.
All of
And,
them were
and
mercury
really
fillings.
large amounts of mercury in your mouth,
Well,
which
that.
is, go on.
Sorry. That mercury
Perfect.
is still in your motor neurons. It doesn't disappear. It's still there. It's from the time you got those feelings till the time you died.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just another thing to look forward to. Anyway, I'm sorry to be laughing about that, but you do
Well,
have to take light of these dramatic situations.
Mhm.
Um,
Who came up with that? Who thought that was a good idea to use mercury as
I know.
a filling in your mouth? I know we were always told from very young, don't ever touch the mercury in the thermometer
Yeah,
because
I
it's
used to
dangerous.
I used to play with it in my hands. I used to literally
Well.
break thermometers and roll it in my hands, and
Wow.
I
Okay.
didn't realize how dangerous that was. But it fascinated me. A liquid metal at room temperature is fascinating.
Sure. Anyway,
I have a
okay.
story about my favorite uncle who was a bohemian, right, and refused to actually live an ordinary life.
I
And
think he had mental health issues
No, I
that
think he was just a
nobody
wonderful person.
addressed. Anyway,
Anyway, he wouldn't get out of bed till like 3
there
PM.
you go.
He dug a huge hole in the backyard to wipe out incandescent lights so he could look at the stars clearly in a pit late at night.
Uh-huh.
He would go shopping when none of the shops were open.
No mental health issues there
But
at all.
on his deathbed, this is no kidding, and I said this to Asper when we first got together 33
It's
years ago.
hilarious.
The last statement to his sister, who used to wake him up with the broom if he wasn't out of bed by 3 PM, smashing on the bottom of the floor where his bed was, a floor above. The last words were, "Oh, for God's sake, go to the garage. I've left the lid off the jar of mercury." That was his last words.
That actually sold me on marrying into the family.
Sure it did.
It did. Anyway,
What I'm curious about is, as a neuroscientist with these incredible qualifications, have you been able to, in your field research as a ufologist, take that science into the field?
Yeah, I have, and I'm sort of like doing something right now. Called I'm studying a disease. Well, no, I can't call it a disease, but an incident, a neurological incident that's happening in the States called Havana Syndrome. So I'm absolutely fascinated by it because there's no real known cause as to what is actually going on, and I'm trying to somehow relate it. Well, I'm not trying to, but I have a feeling from what I've researched that non-human intelligence could be behind it.
That's
Reason
fascinating.
being is that because the actor is extremely intelligent. In other words, what's causing this is something with superior intelligence, because it can actually affect the human brain and initiate what's called an immaculate concussion. In other words, there's some sort of radiation, whether it be microwave or ultrasound, that can target an individual of a particular occupation and at a particular place and actually cause neurological damage. So how can that be that, how could you possibly, I don't think we have the intelligence to do this, but there is something out there that's causing so much trauma to a lot of people in that are in the intelligence community and that are ambassadors of the United States and Canada, but it's only the United States and Canada, which is really interesting.
Well, I
but
believe
funny.
the term. Sorry, go on.
No, you're right. Sorry, I just wanted to finish the sentence. So basically, is it a coincidence that this broke out when the videos from that were not leaked, but they were declassified from the Pentagon about the the Nimitz, the gimbal, and the Go Fast videos coincide with this occurrence of Havana Syndrome in the States, and well, it first happened in Cuba, obviously, because it's called Havana Syndrome. Sorry, Joe, what were you trying to say?
That is really interesting. You're not speaking specifically about pilots of these F-18 craft showing signs of Havana Syndrome, are you?
No, it's not the pilots. It's basically people that are ambassadors. So the first two people that were affected were
they were in the embassy in Cuba, weren't they? They were in the US embassy in Cuba.
Yes.
In what year? What year was that?
So that was 2016. So just 2016.
Oh, recently, right? Okay.
Yeah, just recently. And people, some of the neurologists are saying, oh well, it's psychogenic. Basically, somebody hears somebody having some sort of illness. They hear a sound and then they develop it because it's something that it's a psychogenic thing. But the problem with that theory is that some people were actually affected without the government alert coming out. So they actually developed this syndrome prior to any knowledge of anyone else getting it. So that completely discounts that theory. And also foreign adversaries are categorically excluded from this because the United States, it's been studied by various institutions. For example, Jason, which is a scientific organization, which if they have a problem, if they can't work out what is causing something in terms of like this Havana Syndrome, they'll send in the Jason team, and they're a group of 30 to 60 elite scientists that will actually look at a problem that no one else can actually work out. So Jason actually said that basically it's an actor which with superior intelligence that is deceitful in its actions, because basically what they're saying is that people were hearing cricket sounds initially, and because they were stressed and heard these cricket sounds, which were like 100 decibels, and it was due to the Indies cricket, which was native to Cuba and the West Indies, were causing people to have these problems, that when they heard these sounds, they developed nausea, headaches, vertigo, and all these symptoms. But is the actor actually using a cricket sound to actually instigate the damage and thereby circumventing the fact that it's trying to covertly instigate this damage into the victims?
This is so fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating.
Initially, these stories actually run back much earlier than 2016. And my father was actually, he was a shortwave operator. And in the early 70s, he was speaking to me about the woodpecker signal. I mean, a lot of people, and the news stories I've read, Roger, primarily about this being maybe a piece of electromagnetic warfare.
Scalar wave or something.
Well, infrasound, like an infrasound that's targeted directly at people. But I take it from a neurological perspective, it's much more complex than that.
I think so, because I just think like that. I think the CIA has done a study. Jason did a study, and who else did the study? There was the
the Jason group sounds intriguing, don't
and
they?
Jason wasn't even able to work it out.
Are they like this radical think tank that goes into
a radical think tank? Exactly. Yeah. And they're a group of extremely elite scientists that can work on as a crack team on a problem that no one else can nut out, and they were perplexed by it. Wow. But they categorically excluded a foreign adversary. So I'm sort of trying to think of who has the intelligence to do this apart from
the technology.
We do see now that there's technology even in the public domain with sonic weapons that can actually be used for crowd control. But I take it that this thing is much more targeting in a neurological
aspect.
Very targeted.
It's more advanced.
And I think that. Sorry, you keep going.
No, I'm very fascinated by this notion. Can you explain to us what you mean by the term actor when you're talking about that?
So when I
perplexed.
use the term
Person
actor,
who
it means
initiates
that the thing or the person that's actually doing the damage.
Initiation.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, my father was talking about the woodpecker signal, and he would go into the side bands there in the short wave frequencies and point to this frequency that was coming out of Russia, and that it sounded like a woodpecker when you got it up on an oscillator and gave it some audio sound.
I think I've heard of it. Yeah,
and that was way back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And when the initial rumors before the term Havana Syndrome was spoken about, he was saying, "Oh, well, this is definitely electromagnetic weapons." And I do believe with certain researchers out there, and we can question their credulity, but one of the most interesting tales comes from the life of Mae Brussel. I don't know if you know of her, but she was one of the people used extensively by Jim Garrison for her extraordinary research over thousands of newspapers and magazines.
She cross-referenced everything.
Probably the greatest cross-referencer.
On JFK.
Frank Zappa brought a computer early in the 70s, and she threw it in the bin.
Yeah.
She was Miss Analog, but she was fascinating. But people purport to her death because she crossed over so many lines of covert intelligence. They say that she was a victim of some form of microwave assault that occurred on her.
Wow.
Yeah, but who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. Anyway.
But I think that sounds incredible. Is any of that material in the public domain? Can people look at it? The studies?
The JAMA articles online, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and also there's an ODNI publication which I'm looking at, and I'm part now of an American group called the UAP Medical Coalition. So I just joined, and we're looking at the effects of UAPs on humans in terms of psychological stresses and also any physical effects from a close encounter, and we're looking at not only researching it but also getting these people some help in terms of finding medical professionals that will with an open mind that will look upon this and take in the whole story rather than just say, oh, it's rubbish, you got burnt by a UFO, or things like that. So we're trying to destigmatize it for medical professionals, and there are medical professionals within this group as well.
I'm excited about that. Just in our uncredentialed proletariat way, Asper and I, decades ago, brought our sort of background in the medical world to bear, and we tried to create an invisible college with psychologists and doctors that were open-minded enough to realize that these experiences could have a possibility in three-dimensional reality, and they would go in and we've had a therapist I've dealt with for decades there, Alex Sonomi, who's run a clinical practice and had many people in that practice that were experiencing psychological post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all sorts of myriad of experiences that he could only put down to some anomalous event. But it's very difficult to get those professionals out into the public domain because we still are dealing with so much
ridicule
and lack of credibility around that. So
that's right.
Is there anywhere people can go now in terms of that work you're doing? And maybe just tell us the title of that group again as well. I think it's
UAP Medical Coalition.
Yeah. So you can find them on Twitter, and if you just search for them, they've got a website, and excuse me, they're interested in anyone joining. You don't have to be part of the medical profession. You can be of any. You can have any sort of profession, but you can contact them and join, and they're seeking anyone with any sort of skills that can help out. I think I was the first to have been contacted in Australia. Oh no, I think Grant Levac from Queensland might have been contacted before me, but So, and they're trying to get me to recruit more people as well who can help out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? I think we might both consider that, because
the more people that are working together towards
in a
something,
constructive way,
you know, there's more likelihood of being able to come up with some sort
I
of.
can send you a link.
Our motivation, Roger, like yourself, as not so much being trying, are we delusional enough to think that we're going to expose the truth here? No, by no means. But what we did notice in our background is that people were coming to us with these narratives, and there was certainly suffering. And one of the greatest ways was to be able to let them have a sense of catharsis. And any good therapist will tell you that speaking about it, writing it down, exploring it. And the unfortunate thing in our culture is that you can't really explore it. People have a hard time with their spouses and their families talking about these experiences, let alone the broader community. So I think that's highly honorable work.
Absolutely.
And I'm really excited to hear that you're on board, and we will really consider it. But at the moment, I think what's happening on a grand scale is astounding. I have never lived through a year, and I never suspected a year like this.
And we're not finished yet, so who knows what's coming up.
In ufology in the mainstream world. It's like we've been hit with a tsunami of material. And I think the first place to start, because we haven't spoken to you for quite a few months, and you were a partner in crime with us on that incredible TV series, Close Encounters Down Under. And we're going to see if we can get that second season up. But the most
that'd be great.
We need to get it up. But the most astounding thing to me is that here we have on the world stage this incredible interview that an Australian journalist that's quite respected, major historian, very honest man, comes forward with a whistleblower beyond the credentials of what we've known before on the world stage. So I'd love to know your opinion, and maybe even where MUFON's perspective is on our whistleblower, David Grush.
Well, where do I start?
Just dive in there wherever.
I think he's a very intelligent guy. Obviously, he comes through that he's got this incredible intelligence, and he appears to be extremely honest, and he's got impeccable credentials. Obviously, he's part of the NGA and the NRO, Afghanistan war veteran. He briefed the President of the United States on a weekly basis of highly classified information, and was trusted by the military-industrial complex. Basically, I believe him. I absolutely 100% believe what he's saying is real. But then people saying, well, he's not a first-hand witness. But how, I can't understand why, in any way, how this could be some sort of a psyops where the 40 witnesses that came to him that were first-hand witnesses, who I believe are actually in the USAPs, the Unacknowledged Special Access Programs. Right. I'm not entirely sure what the 40 witnesses are in this case, but why would 40 people come to somebody like that and divulge information about what they were involved with just to lie to this person? It just doesn't make sense. I just can't see how anyone can dismiss this as some sort of psyops or anything. So I think it's real. I've been looking at it for quite some time. Initially, when I located in Timothy Good's book that the document about the Roswell, the crash. That's when I had an epiphany that, oh my God, a craft actually did crash on Earth in 1947, and basically we do have it in storage, and we have bodies. So that was in the 80s, late 80s, that I had the epiphany that this is actually real. We have craft and bodies, and since then we've had developments like the leaking of the Wilson Davis memo, and with James Rigney, who's made friends with James and discussed that quite extensively with him. And so we had an indication that, you know, this phenomenon was real, and that it's documented, and involving, you know, Eric Davies and Thomas Wilson, and, you know, how he tried to break into the program initially in the, you know, early 2000s. And so there's a lot of history behind crash retrievals that I think the general public don't know about, and they might dismiss it outright because of the fact that they haven't got that history behind their belts and under their belts. Because I suppose if I had not studied UFOs for decades, and somebody came up with that idea that, you know, somebody's, you know, sworn under oath in Congress that they know that these crash retrievals exist, and we're trying to reverse engineer it. It seemed incredulous to me that without that knowledge, if somebody said that, you know, I just maybe, I might not believe it myself. But I think that with the knowledge that we have and the background, it all seems to fall into place. That
it does,
this
and
is
I mean,
absolutely real.
People need to look at the research from the past too, which is quite extensive. And
yeah.
Len Stringfield's status reports dating back to the 80s, and I think he wrote his first book in the late 50s, are quite astounding. And then in the 80s, it was difficult for most researchers to palate. But I mean, the entomology, let's step right back to Jesse Marcel and Mac Brazel, and look at the integrity of both those two witnesses. And then you have to realize where there's smoke, there's fire. And there's something to this. You know, Asper and I don't hold a hypothesis when it comes to ufology, but I've spent enough time with researchers like Don Schmidt to realize that there are literally tens to hundreds of eyewitnesses that are basically either first-hand or second-hand eyewitnesses to Roswell now being something that was nowhere near prosaic.
Yeah.
And when you see all those moments that are so Shakespearean with the Pentagon around the anniversary there, and in a way too, you know, we've got interesting material coming to the public's eye, and then you get something that's very similar to what's happening now. You get this absurd footage by Ray Santilli of the Roswell autopsy.
Yeah.
And the mere fact that we're film archivists and we live in a house of 35 mil, 16 millimeter film, we could tell instantly that footage was not film footage. It was not digitized film footage from 1947. It was definitely filmed by a CCT.
I think Santilli admitted to that, and then he said, it actually isn't real footage, but it was sort of like meant to emulate what actually the real footage was. Which,
and you know what? I could have done the same thing, Ray. We could have pulled out a bit of footage here from a newsreel from 1947 and said, take that, and it's too fragile. But, you know, we've got some interesting autopsy footage, but, you know, let's forget about that. But it's quite interesting how those templates, all of a sudden, real information starts to leak forward, and then all of a sudden the world of media starts to collide, and we don't know whether we're being dealt disinformation, perception management, exploitation. And this is what I wanted to go back to David Grush very quickly here. And from a neuroscientist point of view, that story was basically literally dismissed by a young hipsterist journalist with the edgy Intercept online paper, exposing evidently little infarctions within the NSA and the CIA and things like that. And he directly spoke about post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress in David Grush, and one drunken night when he was feeling suicidal. Now, from a neurological perspective, let me ask you, I do not see post-traumatic stress as a mental disorder. I see it as a side effect of, you know, being taken out of your everyday reality and exposed to something that was heavily traumatic. I think that we can acknowledge that it didn't seem to affect his career within intelligence and the media. and that anyone who's had a tour of duty overseas in a battlefield, like Iraq, would tell you that, or Afghanistan, where David was, will tell you that, you know, the majority of people come back with some form of post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can you not?
Absolutely.
Do you see it as mental illness?
I
I don't think it falls into that category.
From what you've just said, you've convinced me that it makes sense from what you've said that it's an insult to the nervous system from some exterior traumatic experience, which is not really what's the word for it? Something that would so, for example, if you had a disease that originated from within the nervous system, it's something that's it's like a car accident or something like that, where you have damage that is done to the nervous system by some external impact or whatever. But yeah, I agree absolutely that it's.
And I think there was a live stream there with the incredible. It's John Greenwald Jr. from the Black Vault, you know, who I think is an astounding researcher and very balanced, and certainly has done the FOIA researches through the Freedom of Information Act that are mind-blowing. And this boy's been at it at 15. But he did a live stream with our journalist, Ken Klippenstein, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And at one point there in that live stream, Ken actually stated, well, the guy's a psych patient, he's a drunk. Why would you take him seriously? And the interesting thing, at the end of his intercept story, he recanted the Pentagon's debunking of Roswell. Now, what that had to do with David Grush, I've got no idea. But in my mind, someone who's had one night when they've got a bit drunk and felt suicidal, who's suffered post-traumatic stress disorder, is probably just a normal way of coping and self-medicating.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we've all had those days.
I think there's not one, and I bet you Ken's had those days himself, but he wouldn't admit them.
Yeah.
And we can all understand post-traumatic stress, if not the disorder, from moments we have where we've seen something that we shouldn't have seen, like a car accident or something like that.
Yeah.
And you know, that trauma stays with you. You go back and you remember that and you start sweating and you get nervous. But let's move on into what I believe is a story that has been debunked so ludicrously that the original story that appears to be so ludicrous may be real. And that's the aliens in Peru. Now, do you think for one moment we're seeing illegal miners with jetpacks and state-of-the-art night vision trying to navigate their way through the canopy of the remote Amazon, you know, to find gold down there? Now, I know a lot of that illegal claim jumping from cartels occurs, but those stories coming out of Brazil are absolutely fascinating.
Brazil or Peru?
Brazil and Peru,
Peru.
But they do go
Brazil.
back in that area and that Amazon canopy decades, don't they? I mean, that's where initially there was so much activity in South America in the late 70s, and that's why, excuse me, everyone, am getting it wrong about Brazil, but it's Peru at the moment.
Peru at the moment.
Peru at the moment.
So
look,
have you?
I haven't really looked into that in any great depth. I know it. I read some reports of it, and I've sort of haven't discounted it as just rubbish, but I haven't looked into it. But I think there was an incident in Brazil. You mentioned Brazil in the 80s where people were actually allegedly attacked by UAPs.
That was in Colares, I think, and that was in the late 70s, about 1978. They had 40 people at least that were medically injured.
One person died, didn't he, of a heart attack or something related to the incident.
Exactly.
So is this now then?
So I don't have an opinion on it. I'm sorry, Jay.
Look, don't be sorry in the least. I was just curious, and as I said to you before, we are being hit with a tsunami about this material. But the fascinating thing here is, if I can talk to you as an aside to that story, the assumption to me is that sometimes, and especially with dealing cases on our continent of Australia, which has such a remote epicenter, you know, we're all very coastal in our CBDs and our build-up. But when you get to the heart of Australia, there is lots
Remoteness.
of remote
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
And I have spoken to many people in remote Australia. I went out there for the ABC To Catch a Flying Star.
That's
And
right.
do you want to turn that off?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
keep talking.
we didn't think that was going to happen tonight, but excuse us, it did. And
Oh,
I
you can
get a
barely
feeling
hear it.
sometimes that the remoteness is what this phenomenon seems to exploit at times. And it
Yep.
may be happening like that down in Peru and Brazil. Do you find that is a consistency, or is it something you've not come across, that there seems to be more cases in remote areas that become quite extreme at times?
Yeah. Well, most of the reports that we get are in, like built up areas like cities, because you have more eyes to the in the sky.
Of course.
But you have instances where you might have sort of like an aspect of the phenomenon, like cattle mutilations, which occur in very remote areas, which is unusual. It's usually a phenomenon that occurs where it's a very remote area of the property where these animals are mutilated and associated with the UAP phenomenon. And
Video.
but you do obviously get reports in the outback, the Min lights and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
The incident with the we had a report. Just bring in MUFON now, but we had an incident recently where there was a lady driving her camper van from she was going to Charleville, I think, and it was in March this year, where she was it was like in the middle of the day, and it was nice and sunny, but a bit of cloud, and she had this, and it was extremely remote area of the highway, nobody else on the freeway. And
can you explain where that exactly is? Where is Charterville?
So it's sort of like central southern Queensland, I think.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's I don't know Queensland. I only know the coast.
Yes.
But it's like central southern Queensland, and so she was driving up to Charleville, and she saw this object on her left-hand side, which looked like a green teardrop-shaped object that was coming towards her at a rate of knots. She thought it might have been a plague of locusts, or a flock of budgerigars or whatever. And then as it came towards her, it actually pushed the vehicle to the other side of the road, and she heard this like a sprinkling of like rice on paper sound with a thump, and she contacted MUFON, and it was unusual that this object had pushed her. She thought she was quite shocked by it, and didn't know what happened. And we did a dust analysis on a vehicle and found this alloy, which was anomalous, of a 80% copper and 20% barium. So we sent a sample to John Ockertel in PRA in Victoria, and they can't explain this particular alloy that allegedly came off this object. So again, in the middle of nowhere, broad daylight. But another thing that happened is that, which we can't explain, is that her, during the impact, or not almost nearly during the impact, her mobile phone made a call for somebody in Western Australia that was working in the airport, and he received a call, but he was on another call, and he rang her back after the impact and said, "You called me," and she said, "No, I didn't." She thought it was a spammer, but he says, "No, I've got your number on my phone." So somehow there was a call that was made from her telephone call to.
So she didn't know this guy.
She didn't know this guy at all.
Right.
At all. No.
Right. But
Just a random person.
Her phone dialed his number.
Dialed his number. So she had the phone on the passenger seat, somehow the impact of the object had caused a transmission of a call from her phone to a random number that
Right.
ended up in Perth. Now I don't know whether it's related or not, but we tried to work out which radio towers it pinged off, and also we contacted Telstra. But the anomalous thing was that the copper barium on her vehicle, which is extremely interesting, and usually it's like a superconductor. So copper barium is a superconductor, but it's usually found in a powdered form. But this was in a sort of a metallic crystalline form.
Wow.
And
what would you use that superconductor for? Excuse me. What would you use it for?
Don't know.
That's interesting. Did you ever find out any analysis of the dust that was found on the Knowles car in 1988?
Yeah, John did look into that, and I asked him about the Knowles vehicle, and he said there was nothing anomalous on it, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought at some stage I'd read something about it being carbon dust, but I'd have to go and look through more notes.
Right, I did ask him. But the thing is that I don't know. They did energy dispersive X-ray microanalysis, which they had. I'm pretty well sure they had the facilities in those days, but maybe I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with the technology at the time. I don't know.
Okay.
But
extraordinary. What an astounding case. Now we might just quickly end off. You've got something else to say there. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. We're just I'm writing an article for the SCU for it. Just because John and his crew did an extremely good job on this case, and a really good report. And they involved many different people, scientists with different disciplines, and looked at the physics of actually, the force of the object moving the vehicle to the other side of the road and all this stuff. And I asked them whether I could actually write up this as a scientific article to submit to SU, and they agreed with it. So we just
so when will we expect to be able to read that article and explain to us what SU is?
Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. In the States, yes. And they accept scientific articles on UAP. I've had a look at some of the articles. They're extremely high caliber articles, which involve a lot of physics and mathematics and chemistry.
Just quickly on this story, do you think there was an electromagnetic effect involved in that car being pushed across the road?
It's hard to say because I don't really know. We think that it might have been the wake of the actual object that pushed the vehicle, and as to whether it was a pressure wave or whether it was a electromagnetic effect that actually pushed it. I said to her, look, did your tire screech? And she said, no. And I said, well, then your hands the wheel must have just slipped out of your hands. And she said, yes, it did. Because I couldn't understand how her vehicle could end up on the other side of the road when she had her hands on the steering wheel, because, it would have had to have, caused some screeching of the tires, So I don't think we've come to any conclusion as to what the actual force was in terms of the physics of it. So
fascinating.
Don't know.
Fascinating. Let's go to this news story just there.
Yeah.
And we'll punch it out.
Astronomers may have found possible signs of life on a planet that is more than 8 times the size of Earth. They say it's unlike anything in our solar system. NASA's James Webb Telescope discovered it in the constellation Leo. That is 120 light years away. And the telescope may have detected a molecule called dimethyl sulfide, exclusively produced by living organisms right here on Earth. Also, methane and carbon dioxide, meaning the planet's atmosphere could be rich in hydrogen and have a water-covered surface. Meanwhile, late last week, NASA releasing the findings of its year-long study on UFOs or UAPs, and I asked former NASA official and member of the NASA UAP study team, Mike Gold, about the report earlier here on Prime, and why NASA is only working with non-classified material. Here's part of that interview.
It's an important aspect of the research, and that is happening, but it's not what NASA does. The reason that I'm so excited to have the agency involved in this is because NASA is transparent. NASA is open. NASA involves the public. NASA reaches out to international allies. And
Okay.
I don't know if NASA's that transparent, to tell you the truth, but very interesting there. Isn't it?
You know what? If they're telling you they're transparent, they're not.
Isn't it amazing to me, though, Roger? I mean, now we've, the Hubble telescope. Now we've got the James Webb telescope. Now, he was the director of NASA that quit on the day of the moon landing, which tells us something. Something really odd.
That was not the right time to quit.
No, it wasn't.
Seriously.
It wasn't. But, and you know what? These exoplanets are getting closer with the possibility for life on them. So I think that's a really interesting story. But let's go to our next story, and then I'll ask you.
Talk of aliens. A Harvard physicist says he may have found evidence of alien technology.
The U.S. Space Command says fragments he found are almost certainly from outside our solar system.
Now, Chris Welch spoke to him about how he tracked down the pieces and whether this could be, in fact, proof of alien existence.
Meteors, pieces of rock from space, find their way through Earth's atmosphere all the time. This is one that pierced a home in Titusville, New Jersey just a couple months ago. But there was something different about one such fireball from 2014.
What was special about this meteor is that it was moving very fast.
Faster than any meteor that had ever entered Earth's atmosphere in the past.
We decided to go to the site of the fireball in the Pacific Ocean and check for any remaining materials from it.
Sort of like finding a needle in a haystack.
It's like finding a needle in an ocean. And indeed, I was doubtful that we will find anything.
But when Harvard physicist Avi Loeb and his team arrived in the waters off Papua New Guinea and dragged this sled equipped with specialized magnets along the ocean floor,
amazingly, we found the materials.
Metallic marbles, less than a millimeter in diameter.
Beautiful spheres that were colored blue, brown, or gold.
The exact composition of those spheres are now being studied at 3 separate laboratories, including one at Harvard. They'll also be working to determine the age of the material. But U.S. Space Command has already issued a formal letter to NASA stating that with 99.999% confidence, they believe the materials are interstellar, meaning they came from outside our solar system. The biggest question...
Okay.
Wow.
Well, I'm really curious about this Avi Loeb story. And if I can digress back, excuse me, I'm actually eating a Quickies because I had an amazing salami pizza with chili before this, and it's killing me now.
You shouldn't be eating stuff like that.
So excuse me.
Otherwise, you will be seeing UAPs.
And listeners, excuse me, and viewers, excuse me. But I'm very, has Ross Coulter got in touch with you as a fellow researcher?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes, yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, he came to my house and we had dinner here, and with James was here as well, James Whitney, and that was prior to him interviewing David Grush.
Right.
Really?
Yeah. Okay.
And did he allude to that story when he was at your place? I'm just curious.
I can't remember. We spoke for about 6 hours, but I can't remember. I don't know whether we broached that story, to be honest.
I don't think he would have.
I was just wanting to see if he's doing his due diligence, and he certainly is, because if there's any UFO researcher in this country, apart from Bill Chalker, this man is the one that he needs to get in touch with.
Mm-hmm.
So has Avi Loeb been in touch with you? And what do you think about going down?
I'm a small fish in a big pond when it comes to that.
How did they do this? How did they realize that 10 years ago they could pinpoint where to put in something that looks like the size of a snow sled and drag it through the silt and pull these spheroids up?
That's
How
like
were they
a
able to
needle.
do that?
That's like trying to find a needle in a universe,
Yeah.
not a haystack.
Absolutely, yeah.
Quite extraordinary.
It's amazing, yeah. I mean, I think it's a bit of luck as well. Obviously, they know where it exploded over the Pacific and Papua New Guinea. I haven't really been. I've been following it, but not in any great detail. But
you're not privy to any of the information, unfortunately.
You know what? We're lucky to have Avi Loeb there. Avi Loeb, to me, is like a James McDonald or a J. Allen Hynek. He's someone who's highly credentialed, Harvard-based, and willing to put his name out there and push science further by having just a great enthusiasm and an imaginative perspective on what could be possible. I don't see any harm in Harvey Loeb whatsoever. I do see a lot of harm in that pizza I ate, though. But go on.
No, I think it's great that we've got a Harvard scientist looking into an astronomer looking into this sort of stuff and using scientific the scientific method to actually work out whether this is definitely extra.
Could you actually? Is that part? I doubt if that's part of your science, but John Ockatel's group could actually, get in there and analyze that material as well, couldn't they?
They could.
Similar
Yeah,
to
they
what
could. They could just
car.
use the EDX to look at the different isotopes of the various metals that's composed of, and then determine the age of it, I suppose, by looking at various aspects of heavy metal isotope decay. I'm not an expert in that field, but if that object was traveling at phenomenal speeds coming into our solar system, so it was definitely extra solar system object. And when it exploded, it apparently exploded at several Hiroshima, atomic bomb.
Wow.
It was an extremely large explosion when it hit the atmosphere, and then just dispersed itself into all these little spherules, which it's hard to say whether it's that. I don't know what the hypothesis is about objects that come into our solar system that aren't coming off. So, for example, like a meteorite from a different solar system. How do you discriminate whether that object is actually just a meteorite that's a rock that's actually dislodged itself from that the orbit around a star and ended up in our solar system, or could it be some form of technology that's been discarded, like our the probe that we sent out, and I've got a mental blank right now.
Voyager.
The Voyager, sorry. Whether it could be something like that, some technology that was sent out. Yeah.
My limited understanding, Roger, and I'm running over you again there because I think my wife is asleep, and I don't want you.
Not.
You were yawning there at one point. But we're doing this late so you can get on that boat. So get with it.
Yeah, yawning is not falling asleep.
Spectral analysis, it's then the light on the spectrum to go, we're dealing with something highly unusual that we don't see all the time. And this may have been when we first heard of Harvey Loeb in terms of the world stage, was to do with Oumuamua, which was supposed to be an interstellar object that had pierced into our solar system and also managed to accelerate out.
Yeah.
And that was the oddity. And even a lot of scientists today are going, you shouldn't be there in Papua New Guinea. I feel like a few of the locals felt that way too, evidently, down there. There was a bit of trouble at the time, but they got through it. But you should actually have got that money and injected it into a program where a probe like the Voyager was sent out to get a closer look at Oumuamua.
Yeah.
Evidently, it was highly reflective, but I'm just going on.
So it's gone out of our solar system.
Yes,
now,
it has. It certainly has.
It's too late now.
And joining me now is Ben Hansen. He is the host of UFO Witness on Discovery Plus. He's also a UFO researcher. Ben, it's always good to see you. First of all, what do you make of this tweet from Jared Moskowitz where he's now saying there will be another hearing? Who do you think we might see? Like, what other witnesses could be coming forward?
Well, first of all, it's great news. I mean, because I felt the last hearing went really well, quite honestly. There was a lot of people that were kind of wanting that firsthand testimony. They wanted to see more evidence. You had Arrow director Kirkpatrick, who was displeased. He said that he wasn't coordinated with these witnesses. So there were some things that they could have done better, perhaps. So in this new hearing, I think it would really help if we do get some of those firsthand witnesses and cut through this red tape. We got to get right down to those that Drush had said he, was briefed from, and get into either classified, skiff, something, and then some of those firsthand witnesses that are able to come forward who've seen and handled this alleged material.
Yeah, and apparently there were witnesses that were supposed to testify the first time, several of them, that backed out at the very last minute because they felt intimidated. So who are those people? And maybe they'll come forward the second time around. A big day yesterday with NASA. They had the big press conference. They released their report. The headline, to me at least, was that they're now going to have this new position, Director of UAP Research. Do you think that's gonna go anywhere?
Well, I think they were worried that the same thing will happen to him that's happened to Kirkpatrick, right? As soon as you're put in the spotlight, the jokes start. Some outlets are calling him the alien hunter. They said they were actually getting threats, not just harassment. And so I think it was legit that they tried to keep him undercover for a while, but he's going to be the center of attention. And so I do think from what I've seen, he does have the qualifications of already being a liaison with the Pentagon. He's a meteorologist and a good person to have in there to kind of regain the trust from the public, because they have a PR nightmare right now. They really need an agency that people can go to and say, hey, look, we're going to be honest with you and transparent. You trust us. We're NASA.
Yeah, it was definitely a little weird when they didn't name him at first and then the name came out later. I think a lot of people just thought that was kind of shady. I got to ask you, Ben, about the alien babies. The picture of the alien babies from Mexico. I don't know what to make of this. I mean, we've tried to cover this topic seriously because there's real evidence, video from the Pentagon. We had the whistleblower first on News Nation. It's a serious topic. There's something going on. But the alien, I'm lost with the alien babies. I think we may have just lost. Did we lose Ben? Look, we put the alien babies up and Ben goes away.
There we go. We lost Ben and we lost the alien babies. Now, what I want to ask you about is, and I feel really bad for Ryan Graves, one of our three amazing whistleblowers there, who actually went down to Mexico and I don't think was prepared for Jaime Maussan, Jamie Maussan, who's been down there for years peddling and having high rating shows. And I initially used to love Maussan's appearances and footage, but then I began to realize that, Jaime, you're not doing the extensive research you need to be doing before you take this material into the public. So what do you think of this?
That turned out to be that weekly show that he was doing was the UFOs, funniest home UFO videos. That's like what it ended up being. Like you know what I mean? It was Mexico's funniest UFO.
But he gets tons of ratings down there, and there's been an incredible culture down there.
Yeah.
But I feel like Jaime has a background that at times is quite questionable. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But this one really took the cake because it's very difficult for us to look at these. I'll just put the images up and talk to them.
Now I've seen
these stories. This goes way back to 2017.
Whatever they are before.
Yeah.
Way before. So this is nothing new.
So what do you know about these alien bodies? I know Gaia was pounding them around for years.
Yeah, I heard about it about 6 years ago, maybe earlier, and they were just doing initial tests on them, and I thought, oh great, at least they're actually doing MRIs, they're doing DNA analysis, they're doing all this stuff, and I thought, okay, well. I'll follow this until they get a publication, and nothing ever eventuated in a peer-reviewed journal. And I sort of thought, well, and then I just lost interest because I sort of thought, well, I did download the article that was available that they did, which explains some of the information, but it doesn't go into the nitty-gritty, doesn't go into the detail about the histological evidence, the DNA evidence, like what base pairs does the DNA have? Is it the same as ours? Did they do sequencing? What did they come up with? Is it I think they said there was 30% of the DNA wasn't related to human. but then again, we're 50% similar to an oak tree, like, but I sort of thought, well, is that what's different about these creatures that makes them wonder that, that they're alien? So I'm a bit skeptical about it. And until they actually release their information and let the scientific community get in and do their own research on it, if they're willing to do that, well, then I'm going to remain a skeptic. But with regards to Ryan being there, unfortunately, he probably didn't realize what Jaime was about. And if you hail back to the time of the Roswell slides,
and
where,
let's pop them up.
And here we are.
Where Richard Dolan was sucked in.
and Don Schmidt.
And Don Schmidt.
Yes.
Yeah, both of them.
I that was built up to some, ridiculous degree by Jaime. And so he's a bit of a bit of a loose cannon.
He's a bit of a shyster.
He's a bit of a loose
cannon.
Sorry. Well,
and maybe Jaime wants to believe that, and I'm always careful in how far we step.
He's more intelligent
but
than
you
that.
know what? These Roswell slides, they had one of the largest stadiums, if not the largest stadium in the world, because all of us are aware that Mexico City is a massive population.
It's one of the biggest cities in the world.
They were charging seats there. They were charging $20 to go online and watch it. And when I initially even saw that blurred version of the slide there, I went, that has to be a museum display.
Of course.
I mean, the card's sitting there, and, maybe we've got a small child that was suffering hydrocephaly or something like that. But I knew initially, just like the Roswell autopsy, that this is not what it's purported to be. And, that wasn't that long ago. We're talking about 2015 or something.
I'm not sure, but
astounding that Jaime can get away with this again.
Yeah, he's doing it again. Outrageous.
Yeah, but I don't think Ryan was interested in UAPs at that stage, and I think that he wasn't warned about what was, what Jaime was like, and what it could be, it could be detrimental for him actually attending this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, Jaime's name took a real beating, once he did that.
The Roswell,
the Roswell slides. His name was marred in that, in the field. And so if you looked him up, I don't know how you weren't able to find that information on him.
Yeah, I get you,
Anyway.
You were stating that you were surprised. I mean, here's some of these beings that we're not seeing wheeled out of the Congress.
No.
That are much larger. And we've even had researchers from UFO research here in New South Wales go down and look at these things.
Yeah.
But again, there's Jamie Moussan with these creatures. Now, why weren't these wheeled out? They're even more spectacular looking.
Yeah.
Well, the other ones
look
like
ones.
They're a couple of garden gnomes from garden artistry. I have to laugh there. And look, we have to realize too that this has been going on for a long time in this area. That people are exploiting this, and all of us are aware that there's some truth in the elongated skulls that don't have the parietal suture and are not shown as signs of cradle boarding.
Yeah.
But, let's just take
The Mexican government was just presented with little bodies claimed to be aliens found in a mine. I do hope that we find real aliens someday, but these are not aliens. These little guys are sculptures. People in Peru have been doing this now for almost a decade. They take animal and human remains from ancient desert burial sites and use them to make art. The heads of the little aliens are made by taking either a dog or llama skull, tossing out the jawbone, hacking the face off of the skull so you're left with just the brain case, flipping that around, and then sculpting a little face on the back of the skull. It's pretty clever. Other bones are added to make what looks like an entire creature, and the sculpture is then coated in diatomaceous earth. This gives it a nice creepy effect and hides any of the cut marks. I find it sad.
So that could be one explanation. I mean, the jury is not
plausible.
in. The jury is not in.
No,
but
it's not.
Just that weight of what happened with the Roswell slides. So let's go back to a couple of original news reports.
Good afternoon. A photo has surfaced that a lot of people are claiming is proof that the Roswell UFO incident was real. It's a picture of an alien-type creature, and they claim it was taken in 1947 in Roswell. Who better check it out than our Roswell reporter?
All right, it's 9:16. The trailer for an in-progress documentary called Kodachrome is getting some buzz among the alien believer community. Filmmaker Adam Dew started his project after his sister found some old slides when cleaning out her friend's basement. Some are calling these the Roswell slides, and there's a lot more to this story. So before we talk to Adam, let's take a look at a clip from his trailer for Kodachrome.
Now, has this been released to the public?
No, not yet.
And the government knows you have this?
I don't know if the government knows.
The military?
I don't know if anyone knows.
As in, you're not scared of it?
Here's what I know so far. Several months ago, I was given a box of 400 color Kodachrome slides that appear to have been taken over a 10-year period starting in the mid-1940s. Two of the slides show what appears to be a small, thin body with a large head in a glass case. All of the photos are part of a collection that belonged at one point to Hilda Blair Ray and her husband Bernard. There aren't many people still alive who knew Hilda and Bernard, but I have been able to piece a few things together. The Rays had no children. They traveled extensively from their home in Midland, Texas, where Hilda was an attorney and an amateur pilot, and Bernard a geologist working in the oil industry. Mixed in with dozens of vacation shots are several unique color photos from the 1948 National Air Races in Cleveland, Ohio, and the 1948 U.S. Open Golf Tournament in Los Angeles. They captured rare color shots of Sam Snead and even Bing Crosby and Clark Gable. There are also stunning close-up shots of then General Eisenhower on a victory whistle-stop tour following World War II. There are dozens more photos that together paint a picture of a very interesting, well-traveled, and possibly well-connected couple. And then there are these last two photos that just don't seem to fit with the rest of the collection.
And that's where we are today.
So tell us about...
Well, that's where we should be today.
Spies.
But listen,
that's what I got from those two.
You know what's
Spies.
astounding to us, Roger, when we look at that, and that trailer has surprisingly disappeared from the internet.
Yeah, it's not there anymore.
That was what was first
only because we downloaded it at the time.
Before the Roswell slides, before, sorry, the Roswell slides, the event, there was this supposed documentary that was in the making.
Yeah.
But look, we know, if anything Asper and I know about is the history of exploitation in film, on television and cinema. And you might have done the poster. Roger Corman did tens of posters before the film was even in production.
Yeah, but that was the impetus to sell the film, and then he would show the poster to the filmmaker and say, I want you to make this film. And then it was up to the filmmaker to do whatever he wanted.
But no one makes a trailer. We recently interviewed the incredible maverick directing team of two brothers, Colin and Cameron Carnes, and Late Night with the Devil, which is going to be an astounding feature once that's released. That had done the world circuit of festivals.
Yeah.
They still hadn't got a trailer out. So my first thing I suspected with that whole process was, what is this trailer? Is there ever going to be a real documentary? And maybe this is a way that you sell the sizzle.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. They certainly sold the sizzle there.
Yeah. And you know what? I've got this feeling it takes me back to MUFON. And excuse me if this is my paranoid mind.
Well.
But in 1989, the author with Charles Berlitz of the Roswell incident actually did the most incredible speech at MUFON, where he exposed himself to be involved in a disinformation sting, especially on Paul Binowitz, where all those stories, of those creepy stories of underground bases that were perpetrated by John Lear and years later assisted by people like Bob Lazar. But he came out and stated that, look, you know, I'm sorry, I was involved in some disinformation there. It didn't go down very well at the time. But I was thinking, and I shouldn't even be putting this supposition out there, but what's happening with like these aliens at the Congress down there, that sort of smearing over Ryan, which he shouldn't do, but it will affect Ryan because he'll be forever linked to that event.
Linked to it. Yep.
It reminds me very similar of what was happening with Bill Moore. Now, Bill Moore actually appeared in an astounding program a year before that. a program that was evidently to be broadcast worldwide within 24 to 36 hours.
Oh, yeah.
It was called UFO Cover-Up Live. I'm going to cut to a rare bit of footage of Stanton Freeman and William Moore from that program.
Earlier in the show, we met Bill Moore. Joining us now is Jamie Chandere, a television producer and director. Both began regular contacts with government agents regarding UFOs 6 years ago and amassed an enormous quantity of information about the government's UFO program. Welcome, gentlemen. Bill, tell us how you first got involved.
I got a phone call after appearing on a radio show from a man who said, "You're the only person we've heard talk about this subject who seems to know what he's talking about." He convinced me that he was a government intelligence agent and wanted to begin disseminating some information about UFOs to the public.
And the man Bill is referring to is Falcon, whom we've seen in shadow to protect his identity.
That's right. I didn't think that I could handle it all alone. The volume of material I was getting from Falcon was rather mind-boggling, so I got together with Jamie.
And we joined forces in June of 1982, and Falcon told us about MJ-12.
MJ-12 functions as a policy-making group relating to extraterrestrial activities and contacts and UFO activities within the United States. They make the policy, obtain presidential approval, and then field activity.
I was going to go through it all there, but I'm missing you. I'm missing you, Roger.
Lies.
And I'm just thinking, there's a great interview actually up on the web with Stanton Freeman talking about that whole incident and how furious he was because he appeared on that program as well.
He did.
That the intelligence contacts of Jamie Chandere and William Moore, Falcon and Condor, actually stated in their very final testimony on that program in silhouette that destroyed the credibility of the
whole
entire
show.
Documentary that the aliens really like strawberry ice cream and Tibetan music.
Yeah.
And
Did you watch that when that came out?
Yes, I did. I
You
watched
did,
it when it first came out. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was in the
yeah.
90s, I think. Was it in the 90s? Or
88.
No, late 80s. Late 80s. Yeah,
I remember the
1988
episode. I actually watched
Yeah.
it when it came out here.
Yeah.
And you know what? When I purchased that a year later on videotape, here's an odd piece of synchronicity. It was the only to-shop videotape I've ever purchased by Kodachrome, by Kodak.
Yeah,
it was
right.
released by Kodak in this country,
yeah.
which is very weird. But anyway,
those two guys, they were just like, they were totally disseminating disinformation. You know what I mean? Because I watched that show and I was there for all the way, but as soon as they said they like strawberry ice cream and Tibetan music, I was out of there. I was like, okay, done.
So let me
That's
tell
just
you,
a piece of crap. Why would they even say that?
But let me tell you what Stanton Freeman said. And
Yeah.
Stanton Freeman said that they were given privy access to real information. This is what disinformation is.
Yeah.
And then if they're going to let that disinformation out, that the only stipulation from inside the intelligence service is that it needs to be fed with real disinformation.
Yeah.
So that the totality of the truth cannot be taken
It's muddied.
seriously.
It's like
muddied.
you've dropped a turd in a punch bowl. It's a good punch, but no.
Yeah.
There's a turd floating around in it. It's
So it's an odd sort of template, that one. I find it really disturbing, and what Jaime Maussan has done for quite a few years there on the world stage when it comes to these amazing events like the testimony of Grush and David Fraser and Ryan Graves is profound testimony. And then all of a sudden, all this noise starts appearing out of nowhere and all this other stuff that's really easy for anyone with a bit of common sense to not necessarily debunk, but to question. All of a sudden, the majority of the population that now in the mainstream are beginning to think there's something to ufology. It's a bit like, what is it, The Boy Who Cried Wolf? That, if we keep calling this is the moment of disclosure and it doesn't occur, and these hokey things occur. So I just like
eventually
your opinion on
believe
that, Roger, before we leave tonight's podcast.
Well, I think that it doesn't really detract from the experiences of Ryan Graves in his I don't know, his testimony at Congress is still valid, and it hasn't been brought to any disrepute by him attending this a bit of a fiasco with the alien money thing going on. So I think that, and yes, you know, like this always happens, that every time you there's some really interesting evidence coming out, it's got to be muddied by disinformation. So yeah, you can muddy the waters and you know, it's like throw people off that you know, off the trail. There's a certain amount of people off the trail, but the people who I can't say true believers, but the people who really want to pursue this from a scientific point of view will still look at it from that angle, and therefore will still keep going. I mean, I would have just given up years ago if I didn't think that, you know, there was something to this, regardless of the fact that you know, you'll get some disinformation thrown in on occasions. And you know, with the MJ12 papers, as the documents as well, same thing happened where you know, the Eisenhower briefing document was allegedly, you know, termed bogus by the FBI, and they just wrote bogus over the document without.
And that was Jamie Shandero that brought those, wasn't it?
Yeah,
the MJ12.
Yeah, most of those documents came from Timothy Cooper, whose father worked at White Sands, and he had access to the printing of these documents. And he, Timothy, got these documents from his father, because his father would, you know, come across this, read these documents, and say, "Oh my God, this is really interesting. I've got to take a copy of it." And that's how Timothy Cooper got them. And then the Woods got them. They actually paid quite a bit of money for Timothy to obtain the documents. And I think that there's some cutting and pasting in these documents as well, but there's some very interesting information that it could well be the part of the original document, and then you've got maybe paragraphs that have been put in which are not real. You know, I think there's some disinformation in those documents, but generally speaking, I think that, you know, there is some real information in those documents.
I mean, when I heard the name Donald Menzel, I instantly went, well, that's got to be true, because, you know, another Phil Klass, but from decades earlier, another aspect of He Who Doth Protest. I mean, I've never seen scientists go to such an extent, release so many books to dismiss what they believe to be us tilting at windmills.
Well, look, for people who are seriously looking into this phenomena, these stories don't deter us. We just go, okay, this is, you know, a bit of disinformation. This is what they do. It's part of the game that they play. But for, you know, when we're trying to get people, you know, that aren't looking into it, and then it all of a sudden gets this, it's high profile in the, you know, in the mainstream media. And then, you know, somebody comes in and does, you know, like something dodgy to muddy the waters. Then people go, oh yeah, see, this is all hokum. It's not real. They just, and that's what upsets me. You know what I mean? Because then the mainstream is never ever going to take it. You know, the major mainstream is never going to take it as seriously as it should be taken. And you know, get you know, scientists and real research into this phenomena to try and work out what it is. That's not going to happen if we get you know, if we're being, you know, if it's being treated like this all the time. That's what gets me the most.
What always gets me is the extraordinary coincidence that all this can occur right at that same time, which makes me think
it's not a coincidence. It's always orchestrated.
It feels like a psyop, but you know, the other thing is we're battling numerous storms here. And one of the storms is no matter what happens out there, the sensationalist aspects, the scientific aspects of this phenomena will rate when it comes to media.
Absolutely.
The public is insatiable for these stories one way or another. And I think we know everyone that's been touched by the phenomena in one way or another is desperate to get a greater understanding of it, especially those that are truly aware that this exists. Roger, I think we've taken way too much of your time late at night. and I can't appreciate you more for giving us your opinion tonight. We would love to get you back in an earlier hour.
We will.
Very
I
soon.
actually like the late night sessions.
Really?
It's just that
Okay. All right.
Remember when Donnie Sutherland used to do the late night music program After Dark? Do you remember that on Channel 7?
I think so. It sounds familiar.
We're going way back.
Yeah,
he did
way
get
back.
he did
That's the
get
70s,
on the
wasn't it?
questionable star Marilyn Chambers. She had done one real film with
Behind the
Cronenberg.
Green Door. Oh, Rabid.
That was her sex film.
Sorry, yeah.
But I did see she was interviewed by Timothy Green Beckley.
I'm going to do it again. Go on.
Who has a big question mark behind his name as a researcher. But she had an amazing UFO sighting before she passed away.
She saw, surprise, surprise, a humongous cigar-shaped.
But it is a true narrative.
It's true.
Yeah.
But, I thought, of course, it's going to be
what a
cigar-shaped with
coincidence.
you, Marilyn. Yeah.
We used to be in touch with this guy called Video Dave. Unfortunately, he had embroidered on his cap.
VD.
Mr. VD. Right, but he had 36 satellite dishes attached to his Winnebago, and he was drawing in every news report on anomalies. He was the internet in real time, analog.
He was YouTube.
Yeah, before it happened.
YouTube.
And I've got a huge book
about UFOs.
And you used to pull it out anything to do with the anomalous world.
Anything that was on TV, news reports, films,
I have
programs.
that Marilyn Chambers on an NTSC tape.
Right.
And we're going to start to do an archival section of this podcast.
We will.
Where we will digitize that material. There was so much material of his that
so
we
he
got.
had people all over the world, and he used to swap. So you could go through his catalog and say, I want this, 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 and this.
We would
and
send
he would
him
cut them,
episodes
and then
of
we would send
Extraordinary.
him stuff from Australia that was being broadcast at the time. And so that's how he acquired and amassed this huge UFO archive on UFO reports from all over the world.
Literally tens of thousands of tapes.
Fortunately, there was a fire in his,
it
all just disappeared. It's just, it's very, very sad. But anyway, the videos that we got in the 90s were really amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So God, we
VD.
can really digress into our own
Can't we just
hoarders buried alive abscess. So again, maybe just tell us about this recent work that you're doing and where people can go up and check you out and get in touch with you if they've got a report.
Need to.
So it's called the UAP Coalition. UAP Medical Coalition. So I posted on the MUFON website. So we've got a Facebook site that covers MUFON Australia and New Zealand. And what I'll do is put their website link on there. And if they're interested in joining, they'll be contacted by Ted Rowe. Do you know Ted Rowe?
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
Yeah, so he's the guy in charge. Well, the guy at the top, and he. So basically, you don't have to be medically qualified, but if you're interested in contributing any of your skills towards this cause, well then, they're interested in taking anyone in that can help out. So, and they're starting in countries other than the United States and looking at different countries and getting more people involved because of the fact that, if disclosure ever does happen, some people may not take it very well. And there could be a lot of post-traumatic stress due to the, the realization that we're not alone, and basically that we have no, these things are flying through our skies with impunity and could be a threat. I don't know.
You know what? I think if they were going to be a threat, they would have been a threat a long time ago.
I agree.
You know what I mean? I mean, what are they waiting for?
I think
seriously.
Well, I think there's always going to be threatening moments, like there's chaos in all reality, and I think also the mere fact that this has probably been part and parcel of civilization from day one. But it's about time we actually stopped and paid attention to it. And I get this feeling from what we're seeing at the moment, there's been this gradual process of trying to acclimate or even understanding if the population could adapt to having this in their consciousness. And I've seen this occur out of the military, the Defense Department, for decades.
Yeah, I know, but
we had
when
Disney
they
with
do-
Lord Keeble, we had all that material.
all that stuff. But every time, you know what they do, surveys, and what is it? How many percent? How many of the population believe that there are other life forms out there? It's like 70% or something, isn't it?
The population
Of the population.
I think so. American population.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Certainly
I've heard that before.
I think it's 30% in the Australian population believe that they've actually we've had contact with an extraterrestrial civilization.
We were already there, man. What are you waiting for? I think it's just the military industrial complex that's got the problem with it. You know what I mean? Because then they're not in control of everything like they think they are.
There may be, I believe in a thing called catastrophic disclosure. There might be some reason that the military industrial complex knows about that we don't know about that could be. I mean, they're there to protect you. So basically, there might be something.
Jobs.
Who knows? You could be right.
Yeah,
there.
I know.
Well, you have got attitude tonight. Listen, just before we end, I had no idea when researching the ups and downs of the other alien story, which is the aliens in Vegas, right? Which, I thought that there was a great ex-police officer that had gone and investigated this story from day one. It was infuriating him because he was getting so many requests for it. He had to put a camera in. He usually did an audio podcast. He goes, I don't know why I need to go on camera. I'm too old to be on camera now. But his name was Doug Popper. And I thought the story had basically dissolved into a hoax. And then I came across the fact that Inside Edition, which I think used to have the Australian
Steve Dunleavy.
Steve Dunleavy was the anchor. Remember him? He used to smoke a cigarette
in the 90s.
and drink a scotch whilst doing the news report. I mean, how lazy can you get?
Or how much of a good time can you be having?
I think he was a bit in cahoots with Packer there. But believe it or not, Inside Edition still exists. It still looks like the production team from the 90s.
It's the story that's gathered worldwide attention. Did aliens land in the backyard of this Las Vegas home?
Recently, we told you about that spooky situation in Las Vegas when a flash in the sky was captured on video.
The reports echoed those campy 50s sci-fi movies about alien invaders.
This could be the beginning of the end.
It started when a mysterious fireball lit up the Las Vegas night sky, which was caught on a cop's body cam. Only Inside Edition is with the family who called 911 that night. 16-year-old Angel Canmore says he saw two creatures in his backyard and was paralyzed with fear. His father and brother say they also saw the creatures.
You believe you saw something that wasn't from this planet?
I believe I saw something, that wasn't from Earth.
Was this really an extraterrestrial sighting? The family says 3 days after the encounter, a government vehicle showed up outside the house with 3 men in black to investigate.
I knew it. This is an alien, and you guys are from some government agency trying to keep it under wraps.
We see 3 guys who was driving a black Suburban with U.S. government plates in it. They was passing around. When we opened the garage, we went through them. They just run away.
Do you think that they were here to investigate what happened?
Probably is.
When Las Vegas cops released the body cam footage, the worldwide spotlight was thrust on the Kenmore family overnight. Total strangers flocked to their home, wanting to see for themselves the location of one of the most intriguing UFO sightings in decades.
We're in your backyard now. Since all of this went public, have people been climbing over your fences?
Yeah.
Science writer and UFO skeptic Mick West has another explanation for what the Kenmores could have seen that night.
The raccoon, which has very big black eyes, could be on top of the fence, and someone could mistake that in the dark.
Okay, now I'm telling you now, if Will Smith, as a Men in Black, turned up there, he would have bitch slapped that whole family. I'm telling you, no, because the parents in the first report said that they didn't see anything at all. It was just the kid. And now the parents have come on board and kept denying that, kept saying, no, I didn't see anything. I didn't see that. And now the parents have jumped in there and gone, oh, yeah, we saw them. And it's like,
but what do you think about that for swamp gas, 21st century style?
Raccoon.
It's a raccoon. I mean, my wife always tells me, stop putting the foundation under your eyes. You look like a freaking raccoon.
Anyway.
I think that thing looks like a meteorite that's going through the sky, and it's very low. And basically, I think people confabulate things when there's something around that's unusual, and I'm not sure what to make of it. But the landing spot that they said in their backyard that made a circular ring was actually there prior to the object allegedly being in their backyard. I don't know.
You know what? We've got a couple of adolescent grandchildren. We've got one
adolescent grandchild.
And, he's very factual, but at times he's given to flights of fancy and uses his imagination. I think you had some highly imaginative young boys that actually witnessed that meteorite coming down, may have had that interest, and out of fear as to what that object was,
wanting clicks on their YouTube channel or whatever, that's the way.
That's how Doug Popper originally evaluated it.
That's how you become famous nowadays. You know what I mean?
And
unfortunately,
it's another interesting story, but it's also the timing of the release of that story.
I'm liking that Men in Black are walking around bitch slapping people. I really like it.
Let's see, you're going to get us thrown off the air. But what do you do? I mean, sincerely,
that was hilarious when Will Smith appeared there. It was like,
you need to get a good night's sleep.
No, I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah.
Look,
anyway.
I think the last thing we're going to go there, because we've taken Roger this far. I said we're only going to do an hour. Look where we are. Let's give Ryan a bit of the minute of this podcast.
Oh my gosh, dude! Wow.
Government officials can't answer this naval pilot's question. With current data, they can deduce just a few things about this mystery dot. Based off of how high it is off the water and how fast it's likely going, it's probably drifting on the wind. And it's brighter than the ocean it's floating above, so it's likely colder than the water and not using a propulsion system. So it's probably not a spaceship. But because data is so limited, it makes this a UAP, an unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Identifying UAP is so important because it's a matter of national security, it's a matter of aviation safety, and it's incredibly important that we're curious about our world around us.
Here's why these objects are so hard to identify and how a new report from NASA could help solve some of these mysteries. Ryan Graves is a former naval F-18 pilot who has been an advocate for researching unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, after witnessing one himself.
That was very surreal to see that, because we immediately thought it was a radar error. But it's almost more unsettling when the thing you thought was an error turns out to be reality.
A new report from an independent study team appointed by NASA is trying to make it easier to identify some of these objects, but the current...
Okay.
So at least we've given Ryan a bit of tenure there. And, I think Ryan's a very sincere eyewitness and a very courageous man, just like David
Grush.
Yes. So how extraordinary. And look, thank you so much for your time, Roger. And my wife's thrown me completely off here at the end.
Look, we can be informative and entertaining at the same time.
That's
okay?
right. Yeah, that's right. I agree.
There we go.
Have you got any performance gigs coming up, Roger? Any music gigs?
No. Ever since I moved down to Kiama, that was it.
It's done.
Left the band and everything. So nothing coming up at the moment. I'm too old for this sort of shit. Sorry.
Oh, don't be
Never
like
too
that.
old for
Don't
it.
be like that.
Never
I
too
still
old.
DJ out there, and the kids look like they've been hit by a piece of 4x2, but they like
They
it.
love you.
Yeah,
They
they
love
love
you.
it. But
Anyway.
it's confusing when this old man walks in, carrying records, and they're walking out with a memory stick,
Yeah.
But look, we'll put a link up to the MUFON Facebook page.
Australia, New Zealand.
And people can get in touch with you there, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
All
So
right.
I'll have that link for the UAP Medical Coalition on there.
Okay, great.
Anything else
Or
that people
send it to me and I'll put it up on
Okay.
on the all.
Oh, yeah,
on the
okay, I'll
info.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
send
on
it
the
to
crib
me.
notes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Anything else that people need to be aware of in terms of getting in touch with networks before we end the cast?
No, I can't think of anything at the moment. But...
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, we really cherish our relationship with you and we respect you immensely. We can't thank you
so
enough
much.
for your time tonight.
I appreciate
And
you.
I've really enjoyed doing the late night one with you. I think next time we'll hit midnight and see where we go with that.
Oh, that could be scary.
Yeah, and all the best in the future and much love to you and your family. And take good
Thank you
care,
so much.
Roger. You have been on Down South Anomalies. This is episode 48 with Roger Stankovic. Is that how I pronounce that?
Is that 48?
Sure.
Vich. Stankovic.
Stankovic. I told you.
Yes, it's that H that always
accent
gets
on
me.
the C.
Stankovic.
Yes, right. Is it episode
it's
48?
Yes, it is.
Thank
There it
you.
is. Yep.
Thank you. Well, you questioned me there.
I
We had it
questioned
right
myself.
in front of us.
Yep. Anyway, all right, kids, we'll be back next week with another episode.
Yeah, but it'll never get as
Something.
good as
Thanks,
this
guys.
guy. This guy is
Yeah,
just such
absolutely.
a gentleman and a scholar. We
Absolutely.
adore him. All right, take
All
good
right.
care. Speak soon.
See you
Thanks.
next
See you guys.
week. Bye, Roger.
Bye-bye.
Bye.